Hello guys. So this stream is about Mern stack. Well, there's no teaching, I'm just gonna it's like study with me.
Hey guys, welcome to another lesson where we learn more about CSS. Now in this lesson, we're going to deep dive into CSS inspection and learn about the Chrome developer tools selected live over here. Change the text by simply typing in the Chrome developer tool. Again, my own use later on. So you can see the colors, you can see the Mern in here, hit submit, and we got that question right too. Number 3 is what is the entire list of what's being striked? And then it sets 2 and 4. For example, if my border width I had set to 0 pixels and 20 pixels, then what that would do is it would set 2 and 4, which is the left and right, to 20 pixels, and then it would set 1 and 3 to 0 pixels. This then becomes top and bottom, and then we've got our left and right. Now another property I want to talk about in regards to the box model is something called padding, and this is most easily seen when we have content such as text. So in this case, imagine that this blue box is a paragraph element, and in the paragraph element we've got hello world repeated many times. This paragraph element has got a border property, and it's a solid black border measuring 30 pixels wide all around. If at this point I add a padding property to this element, then what would happen is it would push my border out by 20 pixels. And in this case, I'm pushing it by 20 on all sides.
So this stream is about Mern stack. Well, there's no teaching, I'm just gonna it's like study with me.
Hey guys, welcome to another lesson where we learn more about CSS. Mern, a border property, and it
So this
And notice how, again, in this situation, the height and the width of this box does not change. It's still the same. The padding simply adds this padding, or space, between the element and the border. In addition to the padding, there's also something known as a margin. And the margin is actually the part that's outside of the border. So here again is the border. In between the border and the width and height of the element is the padding. And the part between the border and any other content that's on screen is the margin. So in this case, we've added a different, and it shows you the margin, the border, the padding, and the width and height. So that's what all of these different colors represent. And when you take a look at the box model on inspection, then you can actually change each of these values to see how it would look differently. If you head over to this address, appbrew.github.io/box-model, and then we go ahead ahead and open up the developer tools, and we select on the first image here, which shows a daytime world. And we go into the box model that's under the Styles tab. If I go ahead and add a margin right here, let's say, I don't know, 100 pixels, then it's going to add that gap. Did you see it just now? That gap between that image and anything that's below it. And if I go ahead and add a margin right here, let's say, I don't know, 100 pixels, then it's going to add that gap. Did you see it just now? That gap between that image and anything that's below it. And similarly, then it's going to right here, that's under the Styles tab. If I go ahead and add a margin right here, let's say, I don't know, 100 pixels, then it's going to add that gap. Did you see it just now? That gap between that image and anything that's below it. And similarly, if I add a little bit of a margin above, say 100 pixels, then you can see it adds a gap between that image and the next element above, which is that paragraph tag. However, if I added the padding as 100 pixels, then you'll see it add the space as well, but it's actually inside the border of the image. If this element actually had a border, which we'll set as 10 pixels solid black, then you can see how that padding goes to a different place versus where the border goes. And this box model is going to come really, really handy when you start to try and lay out different items when they come versus where the border will set as 10 pixels actually had a border, which we'll set as 10 pixels solid black. And you can see how that padding is tab. If I go ahead and add a margin right here, let's say, I don't know, 100 pixels, then it's going to add that gap. Did you see it just now? That gap gap between that image and anything that's below it. And similarly, if I add a little bit of a margin above, say 100 pixels, then you can see it adds a gap between that image and the next element above, which is that paragraph tag. However, if I added the padding as 100 pixels, then you'll see it add the space as well, but it's actually inside the border of the image. If this element actually had a border, which we'll set as 10 pixels solid black, you can see how that padding goes to a different place versus where the border goes. And this box model is going to come really, really handy when you start to try and lay out different items on your website, determining how they look and where they're placed relative to each other. The final thing I wanted to mention is that padding and margin, similar to what we saw for the border and also the border width, function in that same way where we've got 1, 2, CSS inspector, and it shows you the margin, the border, the padding, and the width and height. So that's what all of these different colors represent. And when you take a look at the box model on inspection, then you can actually change each of these values to see how it would look differently. If you head over to this address at brewery.github.io/box-model, and then we go ahead and open up the developer tools, and we select on the first image here, which shows a daytime world, and we go into the box model that's under the styles tab. If I go ahead and add a margin right here, let's say, 100 pixels, then it's going to add that gap. Did you see it just now? That gap between that image and anything that's below it. And similarly, if I add a little bit of a margin above, say 100 pixels, then you can see it adds a gap between that image and the next element above, which is that paragraph tag. However, if I added the padding as 100 pixels, then you'll see it add the space as well, but it's actually inside the border of the image. If this element actually had a border, which we'll set as 10 pixels solid black, then you can see how that padding goes to a different place versus where the border goes. And this box model is going to come really, really handy when you start to try and lay out different items on your website, determining how they look and where they're placed relative to each other. The final thing I wanted to mention is that padding and margin, similar to what we saw for the border and also the border width, function in that same way where we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 values that we can provide. And if we provide a different value for each of them, so 0, 10, 20, and 30 pixels, then this will determine how it looks on all 4 sides. And you have to remember that this is where the first value is, second, and it goes around in a clockwise direction. Again, with border width, you can change to only provide 2 values, so say 10 pixels and 40 pixels, then this is going to be applied to the top and the bottom, and also the left and the right. So this is just a particular way of how these 3 properties can accept multiple values. If you only set one value, say 10 pixels, then that's going to affect all sides. In addition to the boxes that are created by elements, we can actually create our own boxes independent of that. And that's really useful when we want to group different bits of content together so that we can style it together, or maybe we want to lay it out together. For example, here we have an image, and maybe I would want the image to have a caption. And I would probably want to style these 2 bits together so I can wrap a box around these 2 elements. And the way that I would create these artificial boxes is through the use of a HTML element, which is called the content division element. There's no point learning about the div element before we could learn about CSS, because these are completely invisible unless you apply CSS style to it. And the whole purpose is to act as an invisible box that can contain content in between the opening and the closing tags. In the middle, we can put as many elements as we want, and we can group them into separate boxes known as divs. So here I've got the HTML code from that website I showed you earlier with the two versions of our world, the morning and the evening view. And it's really simple, and I've only just taken the body section of the HTML. But here notice that we've got a paragraph tag and an image tag, and they're grouped together through the use of this div element. And notice that the div element doesn't really do anything else other than act as a container to group this section together so that it's separated from other content, for example, this section right here. And now we've not only added meaning to our HTML by saying this is one section of content and this is another section of content, but in addition, we can style them differently in CSS. When we run our code, this is what the website would look like. You would not see any of these div elements. But if we were able to see them, then they would look like this, grouping our elements together. Because these divs are invisible, sometimes it can be really hard to debug them and understand what's going on, or more likely what's going wrong with your CSS. So there's a free Chrome extension that I recommend you download to make this process of debugging a little bit easier, and hence that's why it's called Pesticide. We're going to use it to get rid of bugs in our CSS. I'll add a link to this Chrome extension, and all you have to do is click Add to Chrome and then Add Extension, and once you've got it, then you should be able to look inside your extensions and then open it up to activate it. Now, what does it do? Well, let's demo it. In addition to the suite of developer tools you've got, now you've also got the pesticide working for you. And once you activate it, you can see these div boxes now show up on screen. And you can also see the different elements highlighted in boxes, and it really helps you diagnose what's wrong with your box model when it does go wrong. In addition, if you close down the Chrome developer tools and hold down the control key, when you hover on each of these boxes, down at the bottom of the screen, you can see how it tells you which node you're actually hovering on. So in this case, I'm inside a div, and it shows you if there are any classes or IDs on that div as well. And then here I'm hovering on an image element, and here I'm hovering on a paragraph element. And this can be really helpful for you to see exactly what's on screen and almost like put on night vision goggles so that we can see our divs and our elements and their alignment and their sizing. Finally, we're going to use everything that we've learned and put it all together in this exercise. We're going to write some code and apply our knowledge. Go ahead and download this zip file from this current lesson, extract it and open it inside VS Code. Now, once you've done that, open up the index.html and you should see a bunch of to-dos. Learn and put it all together in this exercise. We've highlighted in boxes, and it really helps you diagnose what's wrong. In this case, I'm in I want you to follow each of the steps one by learn and put it all together in this exercise. We've highlighted in boxes, and it really helps you diagnose what's wrong. In this case, I'm in by one, just as if you were around. So then we have all right, so for the final project, we're going to be building a motivational poster website, and we're going to make our own memes. You might have seen some of these around the internet. There are the serious ones, which are based off these 90s motivational posters, where you have some sort of title and you have some sort of motivational text like potential. We all have the tools for greatness within us, and I believe that is true, and you've got a cute little Arctic fox. But also, there are some pretty hilarious ones like coolness. You may be cool, but you'll never be 4 pop collars cool like this guy. So the goal is to make our own website where we can create our own motivational poster. The important part of a motivational poster is there is an image that is going to be big. There is a border around the image, so we now know all about borders, and we can do that. We have a black background, and that is easy because we know all about CSS color properties. We have a big main title, which we're going to use a custom font for to mimic this font a little bit better. And finally, we have a paragraph at the bottom. And we're going to figure out how we're going to center things on the screen, how to add borders, and how to apply basically everything that we've learned so far in this section. Go ahead and download the starting project files for the motivation meme project and extract it, and then open it up inside VS Code. I've created a task in a sort of to-do list breakdown for you. Now, the main thing is that it's your website, it's your project, and as with all the projects in the course, it's totally up to you how you want to create it, but there are some caveats, and it's important that you touch all of the learning points. So these 6 points are important, and after completing these 6 points, you can change your website, you can mess with it however you like, but I want to make sure that everything you've learned so far has consolidated and it all makes sense. We're going to use a custom font from Google called the Libre Baskerville, which looks somewhat similar to the motivational main title font. You should add your own image into the images folder under the assets folder. I've got an example image in here for you just in case you want to use it, but I recommend putting in your own images just for practice. And that image should have a 5-pixel white border. And the text should be center aligned, and you should adjust the margin so the image and text are centered on the page. Now, this is going to be the trickiest part because centering elements using CSS is a whole science in itself, but we're going to do it simply. We're going to horizontally center the div by giving that div a width of 50% to take up 50% of the screen. And then if you think about it, there's only 25% left on each side. So if we have a margin left of 20% on that div, then it should push it into the center. In addition, you might find it useful to set the image to have a width of 100% so that it fills the entire container div, so that you're not having to center the image along with the div. Some of these hints are only going to make sense once you get started writing the code for it, so don't worry too much about it now. I'm just highlighting certain points in the to-do so that when you get to it, to pay more attention to these parts and these helpful tips, which you'll probably need because especially this point number 5 is quite a difficult task and it will take some time for you to figure out how to get it to look like this. And if you want to push the div down vertically, then I recommend just adding a top margin to push it down by a pixel amount. It doesn't have to be spot bang in the middle of the center, because as I said, that is a whole science in itself, and we're going to be covering it in coming sections, but it's just a little bit more complicated. So we're going to judge it by eye for this project for now. In order to get something that looks like the goal image, I recommend putting the H1, the paragraph, and the image inside a div. That way you can center the div on the screen and you won't have to mess with all 3 elements and their centering, which is really a hard enough task. Finally, you're going to use your developer doc reading skills and learn by yourself about a property called text transform and figure out how to make the H1 look uppercase like what I got in the solution goal website. All of these elements are on screen. We've got the white border around the image, we've got the black background, the white text, the custom font, and our H1 is totally in uppercase without us having to type it in uppercase, so that's where that text transform property comes in. And notice how this entire content div is roughly somewhere in the center, horizontally and vertically, just judging it by eye. It's not perfect, but as long as you find the perfect avocado, everything else is easy in life. Pause the video now and complete this project. The solution too hard. Now, in the head section, we want to have all our elements that is more or less center aligned. And we use that trick with setting. Hey guys, today we're going to learn all about the CSS cascade, and you're going to understand why it's actually called a cascading style sheet after completing this lesson. So what exactly is the meaning of wide so that it would fit fully into that poster?